Hello, and welcome to SwamiLee's Sports Talk. I'm SwamiLee,
I'm Mike.
and we're here to talk to you about anything and everything in the sports world. Now, we are not rehearsing anything. Do I know your three topics?
You do not.
So we are not rehearsing. So if we pause a little bit or we're not sure about something, that's why we feel it's a little more interesting conversation. This is the first of what we hope to be many SwamiLee Sports Talk episodes. This will be geared upon baseball and the Phillies. Why the Phillies?
We both grew up in the Philadelphia area. We're both Phillies fans, even though we're not wearing Phillies jerseys.
And why aren't we wearing Phillies jerseys?
Because we don't own any to fit.
I hate to admit that, but yeah, my last Phillies jersey, I was a little bit, not quite as hefty, we'll just say. But nonetheless, got my Brewers jersey on.
The nicest jersey I own is a 1966 Jim Palmer throwback from when I went to Camden Yards last year, the 50th anniversary of when they won their first World Series.
And I've owned this thing, well, let's say it's older than most people that can be watching this video. But this is the good old days when the Brewers had a really cool logo, unlike today where they kind of stole Miller Beer's logo because they're the big sponsor. Anyway, without further ado, the format is this. Mike has a topic I know nothing about. He's going to ask me the question, and we're going to go on from there.
Well, our first topic, Lee, involves baseball today. Since the World Series began last night, it's only natural to ask, what did the Swami say was going to happen between the Dodgers and the Astros?
Well, the Swami's not looking so good right now after Game 1. The Swami has, by the way, just so you know, a 7-1 ticket in Las Vegas for the Astros to win the World Series. We were there a month ago before the playoffs, and that was the team I picked to win the World Series.
And by we, you mean you and Mrs. Swami and not we.
That is correct. That's me and Mrs. Swami. So, anyway, the point of my story is this. I believe, and I still believe this, the Astros will come back and win. I predicted 7 games for the Astros to win, figuring Kershaw is going to win his 2 games. The rest of the Dodgers pitching staff is good, but it's not Clayton Kershaw by any means. Meanwhile, you have Verlander going in Houston. Keuchel pitched pretty well yesterday.
Yes, he did.
I think they're going to come back. They're going to win. They're going to be strong. Correa, Bregman are studs. And I'm going with the Astros in 7, despite the fact that they're down 1-0.
Well, unsurprisingly, I do disagree. From the outset of the playoffs, I've been saying that either the Dodgers or the Cubs would come out of the National League and win it all. I'm half right. The Dodgers did come out of the National League. And after the way things went last night, between Kershaw's great performance finally shrugging off demons of past postseason failure and the bullpen coming on strong for the last 2 innings, I'd say that my prediction of Dodgers in 6 looks pretty good.
I have to say, so you said either the Dodgers or the Cubs. So in other words, the number 1 or the number 2 seed, you were pretty confident was going to come out on top in the National League.
Well, I said the Dodgers or the Cubs would come out and win the series, not merely come out. In other words, I discounted all 6 American League teams.
Well, just so you know, even when the Yankees were down 2-0, I figured Terry Francona would somehow screw it up. After suffering through him for 4 years here in Philly, when he didn't even know how to do a double switch, I was confident he would blow it. Please note, without an all-star team at every position, an all-star player, he can't win the big game.
Well, Lee, some people would compare him to Bill Belichick. Different sport, I know, but Bill failed in Cleveland and thrived in New England. Who's to say that Terry didn't do the same thing?
Well, here's the difference with that. Bill Belichick had Tom Brady, no running game, and part of the time didn't even have good receivers. Terry Francona in Boston had an all-star at nearly every position. Okay? I could win with an all-star at every position, without a doubt. Okay? I mean, tell me 2 players that on Boston starting that weren't all-star potential.
I won't have that argument with you, and for what it's worth, I actually agree. The Terry Francona we saw in Philadelphia is a lot closer to the real Terry Francona than what he lucked into in Boston, and to really what he lucked into in Cleveland.
Well, keep in mind, the American League Central is a terrible division. They're horrible. I mean, it's much like the Nationals this year. Again, you could have put me at the helm of the Nationals, and I'm going to win 90 games. I'm serious. The Phillies were terrible. The Braves weren't very good. The Mets were awful. I mean, half their team was injured. And the Marlins were a mediocre team.
Yes, they were.
I mean, you've got 76 games against 4 awful teams. If you don't win 45 to 50 of those games, how bad are you? Think about that for a minute.
Well, let's turn away from Terry Francona and find something else we disagree on.
that won't take much. So the bottom line, Astros in 7, excuse me. Astros in 7. You're going with the Dodgers in 6.
Yes.
So obviously, you know, I'm going to be right. You're going to be wrong.
Well, when we have our next broadcast, actually, the series won't be over yet. So
it probably will not be over yet.
Not unless it's Dodgers in 4, which would be okay.
The Dodgers will not win in 4, but I'll tell you a quick story. Back in when the A's played the Reds
in 1990,
the A's were favored crazy. Okay?
I remember.
Crazy. And my college roommate, one of my college roommates, not the guy that was. Anyway, I'm going to go there. Anyway, back to the story. My college roommate bet me on this. Now, we bet big bucks back in 1990. It was a $4 bet.
Gosh, with inflation, that would be at least 7 or 8 now.
Exactly. But he told me if the Reds swept, I'd get $8. Now, for those of you old enough to remember, the Reds went in and swept the A's, which was pretty crazy if you think about it. So I won a whopping $8. Now, in my day, that's like a Grand Slam breakfast, an orange juice, a tip, with some money left in my pocket. So, anyway, that's the World Series. That's 2017 World Series. Look for 2018 World Series. I'll make my early prediction now. 2018 World Series. The Astros will return, but they'll be playing a different team. That different team is going to be the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Well, I've got to disagree with you there. Out of the National League, then those Washington Nationals are going to get over the hump in 2018 and find a way to get to the World Series, where they will be beaten by a resurgent evil empire, the New York Yankees.
Well, there is no way the Washington Nationals even win a postseason series. So we'll stop right there with that topic and move on. But first, we're going to take a break and go to our word from our sponsors. Sports Cards and Collectibles is located at 2673 Haddonfield Road in Pennsauken, New Jersey. We're located right between the Cherry Hill Mall and Route 130. SwamiLee's has a large selection of sports cards, collectibles, die-cast, figures, single cards, vintage cards, new cards, boxes of cards, and so much more. Come stop in and see the Swami. We're open 6 days a week, and our website is www.swamileecards.com. We're back. SwamiLee's Sports Cards and Collectibles in Pennsauken, New Jersey. I'm Swami Lee.
I'm Mike.
And we're going right into topic number 2. And remember, I don't know what this topic is. This is a totally fresh question, totally uncanned, or whatever you want to call it. I know nothing. I'm Sergeant Schultz right now. So, number 2.
Well, from 1969 to 1993, Major League Baseball had the League Championship Series followed by the World Series. So that's a very discrete era. And so, Lee, focusing on that era of baseball, 69 to 93, why don't you tell the viewers what the worst trade in Major League Baseball was?
Wow, the worst trade in Major League Baseball. Now, I'll tell you up front, he already knows the answer to this, as we've discussed this in many bars, many times. Again, there have been a lot of bad trades we could start off and talk about. Believe me, we could talk Rick Wise for Steve Carlton, but that was nothing. Okay? We could talk Willie Randolph for Doc Medich. Nothing. These trades were nothing compared to the very worst trade. But the important part about the worst trade wasn't just the trade itself. It was why it happened. Without a doubt, the worst trade, probably in the history of baseball, I'm talking including Babe Ruth, the selling Babe Ruth so they could finance Nanette. The worst trade had to be Larry Boa going to the Cubs along with Ryne Sandberg for Ivan De Jesus. Now, the main question people say is, why is that, right? Let me tell you why that is. Nobody knew Ryan Sandberg was going to be a Hall of Famer in 1982. Nobody knew it. If they say they knew it, they're lying to you. So just ignore them completely. It has nothing to do with it. It's not, oh my God, they traded a Hall of Famer for Ivan De Jesus. That's not it. Larry Bowa was a very, very good shortstop. Larry Bowa was a borderline Hall of Fame shortstop with his defense plus his 20-some hundred hits. Okay, he hit for 270, 280 average. He was fast. He had a glove. He was still doing well. The problem with Larry Bowa was he wanted a multi-year contract. And Bill Giles would not give him a multi-year contract. So Bill Giles said, I'm going to trade you. Because Bill Giles knew nothing about running a baseball team. I'm telling you right now, I could run a baseball team better than Bill Giles, and I will stand behind that statement.
Well, I don't know, Lee, if you really understand the dynamics of a small market team like that.
Oh, don't even get me started on the small market team. But this is the reason why the trade was so bad. It is, again, it has nothing to do with Ryan Sandberg, the Hall of Famer. Ivan De Jesus was a 230 hitter with a decent glove. Now, he was probably 8 to 10 years younger than Larry Bowa, don't get me wrong.
But he was a dime a dozen player.
He was nothing special. Ramon Aviles could have played as well as Ivan De Jesus. Okay? So, the Phillies wanted to dump Larry Bowa. That's fine. They dumped Greg Luzinski for $150,000. They dumped Bob Boone, and then he spent 8 years playing in the major leagues after that, being recognized as one of the greatest defensive catchers in baseball history. But Larry Bowa for Ivan De Jesus, straight up, was not a fair trade. The Phillies were getting ripped off, trading away straight up. But this is what happened, for those that don't know, at least allegedly happened. Larry Bowa knew Dallas Green from Dallas Green's days as the Phillies manager. Allegedly, Larry Bowa called Dallas Green and said, I know you're working on this trade. Get this kid Sandberg. He's really good. So Larry Bowa probably knew Ryan Sandberg could be a Hall of Famer, unlike everybody else. So Dallas Green casually calls up and says, hey, Bill, this De Jesus for Bowa thing, no problem. How about throwing that kid Sandberg in there? He's nothing special, right? And Giles just jumped at it and all of a sudden throws in. I'm telling you, he could have thrown in Scott Munninghoff. I'd be just as upset. He could have thrown in David Doster. I would have been just as upset. He could have thrown in any young player. It was ridiculous that they would do that in 1,000,001 years, throw in a player with a borderline Hall of Fame shortstop for a 230 hitter that was not as good of a fielder as Larry Bowa. Now I'm going to catch my breath for a moment.
Well, you know, Lee, we could make this segment just about bad trades the Phillies made during that 69 and 93 era, and you touched on my pick for the worst trade, Carlton for Rick Wise. For those of you who don't know, Steve Carlton began his career with the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was a good contributor on the teams that won the 67 World Series and 68 pennant. Won 20 games a couple of times, and while he was overshadowed by the much older Bob Gibson, anyone who knew baseball could tell that great things were coming for Steve Carlton. So why did the Cardinals trade him to the Phillies? Because of money. The owner of those St. Louis Cardinals did not want to give Steve Carlton a $100,000 contract, which was a hell of a lot of money. So he picked up the phone and contacted Ruly Carpenter, the owner of the Phillies, and they traded him straight up for Rick Wise. Now, what did Rick Wise do? Well, he put together some good numbers for a bad Phillies team in the 60s and in 1971. His claim to fame was, of course, pitching a no-hitter and hitting 2 home runs. But even then, anyone who knew baseball could see that Rick Wise did not have the future in store that Steve Carlton did. So what happened? Well, Rick Wise never replicated the success he had in Philadelphia, and Carlton went on to win 4 Cy Youngs, a World Series, and to have maybe the single greatest season in my lifetime and in your lifetime, when he went 27-10 for the 72 Phils and led the league with over 300 strikeouts, a .198 ERA. So, as bad as the trade Sandberg and Bowa for De Jesus was, I'd have to say it doesn't quite reach the level of Carlton for Wise.
I disagree with you for one reason. Rick Wise stayed in the major leagues for roughly 10 years after the trade. Now, he was no Steve Carlton by any means, okay? That being said, he was still a major league starting pitcher for up to 10 years after the trade. Ivan De Jesus played for the Phillies for like 2 years. They gave him away along with 2 other players. I think he was in the Dave Rucker trade. Don't even get me started on the Dave Rucker trade. And then he was out of baseball after being a utility player for a little bit. So that's why I think that he is going to be. That's a much worse trade when you throw in a prospect when you were already getting ripped off in the trade. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well, I guess that's another one we're going to have to disagree on.
Well, we'll be back in a moment after the break from our sponsor. Sports Cards and Collectibles is located at 2673 Haddonfield Road in Pennsauken, New Jersey. We're located right between the Cherry Hill Mall and Route 130. SwamiLee's has a large selection of sports cards, collectibles, die-cast, figures, single cards, vintage cards, new cards, boxes of cards, and so much more. Come stop in and see the Swami. We're open 6 days a week, and our website is www.swamileecards.com. Back at SwamiLee's Sports Talk here at SwamiLee's Sports Cards and Collectibles in Pennsauken, New Jersey. I'm SwamiLee.
I'm Mike.
And we have one more topic to go, and once again, I do not know the topic he's about to ask me, so go for it.
Actually, Lee, I have a little surprise for you before we go to the third topic.
Okay.
Now, in the future, we're going to let the callers take care of this, but since we don't have callers today, I'm going to be the one to play a little game called Stump the Swami.
You've been trying that for years.
I've been succeeding for years.
You have not been succeeding
for
for years.
Before I drop the name, why don't you explain to our viewers what Stump the Swami is?
Okay. Let's be honest for a moment. Growing up, I didn't have much of a life. I readily admit that to you. I don't try to hide it. Okay? So while all you guys out there were going out on dates and you were hanging out with your friends, I was at home reading baseball books. Because of that, from the years late 70s into 1989, I pretty much know just about every player to ever put on a uniform in the major leagues, something about that player, be it his position, be it a team he played for. I've lost a little bit as I've gotten older, so if you say Joe Smith, I may miss it. But if he batted 40, 50 times in the major leagues, if he pitched 20, 30 innings, and his name isn't Smith or Jones, the odds are I probably know something about this player. He's been trying for years to stump me. I think he did get me one time, but it was a guy named Smith or Jones. So, go for it.
Well, I'm going to give you an easy one for starters tonight. Gary Gray.
Gary Gray was a Seattle Mariner. I believe he was an infielder. It was around 82 to 83. Again, it may not be perfect, but that information is definitely legit, as I do remember Gary Gray.
Okay, well, I'll give you partial credit because you didn't name any of the other teams he played on.
Once again, the rule is I'll tell you something about the player. And Gary Gray played for the Seattle Mariners, and I believe it was around either 82 or 83 when he did play for the Mariners. So I did my job.
I believe, to be precise, it was 80, 81, and 82.
82 was part of it. Okay.
All right, well, folks, I failed to stump the Swami tonight, but it'll happen soon, maybe as early as next week.
One can hope.
Now, you'd like to know what our third topic is?
I do indeed.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit to the 1990s.
Okay.
I'm sure you remember a lot happened in baseball in the 90s. Realignment of the divisions, new teams, performance-enhancing drugs. But what I want to talk to you about is the man who, some would say ran baseball, some would say ran it into the ground in the 90s and the 2000s, one Bud Selig. For myself, I take a dim view of a lot of Bud's so-called achievements, but let me hear your perspective on Bud.
This is a tough one. This is a really tough one because I have mixed views on Bud Selig. As a Brewer fan, obviously Bud Selig brought baseball to Milwaukee in 1970 after the Seattle Pilots failed miserably at Sick's Stadium, that's S-I-C-K-S Stadium, and they went bankrupt a week or month before the season began. And everything I collect personally is vintage Milwaukee Brewers. You see the logo of Robin Yount. In my opinion, there's no logo after that. So Bud Selig, from that perspective, I like the guy. Okay. That being said, how good of a job did he do as a commissioner?
That's where I take my issue.
I'm kind of tight on that one. He did what everybody wanted him to do. His job is he works for the owners. You can pretend he doesn't, but he works for the owners. He made the owners a lot of money. He turned a blind eye to the PEDs. There is no question about it. But who can honestly look me in the eye and tell me that in 1997 they cared that Mark McGwire was doing PEDs? All they cared about was his 70 whatever home runs he hit that year. All he cared about was Sammy Sosa hitting 66 home runs. I mean, Sammy Sosa was a punch and Judy hitter his first couple of years.
Oh, I remember.
Look at Brady Anderson. Brady Anderson never hit more than 19 home runs in his career. And then he hit 51 one year. And then he was out of baseball with injuries within a couple of years. I mean, I'm not making any accusations because I don't want to be sued, but even Jim Palmer feels negatively about Brady Anderson. So I don't hold it against Bud Selig the way that a lot of people do. But really quick, because you brought up Bud Selig, I'm going to tell you a Bud Selig story that you may have heard. I know they have not heard. 1992, there was no internet, as you know. I mean, it existed, but we didn't basically have it. I get home from work one day about 4:30. I open the sports page of USA Today. That's where we got our information back then. And it says Paul Molitor signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. I freaked out. I'm not kidding. I freaked out. It was really pathetic, you know, being in my 20s, getting that upset. But I was really, really upset. So I didn't know what to do. So the next day, I called up the Brewers, and I said, I want to talk to somebody. I'm really angry about this Paul Molitor thing. And the girl on the phone says, who do you want to talk to? I said, well, I'd like to talk to Bud Selig, but he's not going to talk to me, so who can I talk to? She goes, let me transfer you to Mr. Selig. I was like, sure, great, no problem. Anyway, she transferred me to Bud's voicemail. So I left him a nice, respectful voicemail saying, I can't believe you let Molitor go, blah, blah, blah. Why'd you do that? Why couldn't you do this? Here's my phone number. Call me back. Now, let's be honest. The likelihood of, you know, me getting a return phone call from Bud Selig is the same likelihood that, you know, the Brewers are going to win the World Series that year. But funny thing happened maybe 20 minutes later. My phone rang. And the guy on the other end of the phone said, Lee? I go, yeah. He goes, this is Bud Selig of the Milwaukee Brewers.
Now, this is before the days when everybody had caller ID, so...
I thought it was my buddy screwing with me.
Yeah, exactly.
I really did. I thought he was messing around with me. The bottom line is, when I realized it was him, we talked for no more than 10 minutes. I didn't want to time up too long. I told him my concerns because they had two really bad contracts, Bill Wegman and Franklin Stubbs. When those two contracts expired, they could have afforded to give him Molitor more money. So they could have given him a contract, maybe more money the second year, more money the third year. He said to me he respected my, my opinions, but I have to get over it. Now, you may say that's kind of rude or nasty or whatever it is. Bill Giles, you never would have called me if I had said something about the Phillies and called you up about that. You never would have called me. Bud called me, so please remember, at the end of the day, love him or hate him, I'll always have something special in my heart for Bud Selig because he called me back.
Well, maybe because I don't have such fond memories of Bud, I remember things like the abominable decision to make home field advantage in the World Series turn on who won the All-Star game. And of course, we all remember in 2002 when that All-Star game that was going to decide who had home field advantage ended because everybody ran out of pitchers.
Now, hang on a minute. How can you blame Bud that the teams ran out of pitchers?
You can blame Bud for having home field advantage turn on something completely outside the control of the teams that actually make the playoffs.
Oh, I'm not questioning that. I'm asking specifically, how can you blame him for the fact that the game ended up in a tie? That's all that I'm asking you.
Well, you can blame him because it was his decision to have the game end.
Well, they had no pitchers left.
Well, during a regular season game, if you run out of pitchers, then you're going to see Wilson Valdez or Jose Oquendo or Jose Canseco come out and pitch.
You don't want to see Jose Canseco come out and pitch. Trust me on that. But the bottom line is you can't do that. You can't risk the injury to those players. You can't let a pitcher go 3 innings now. You know, if his team is competing for getting the playoffs, you let him go that extra inning, the extra 2 innings. You can't do that in the All-Star game. It's not right. I am in agreement with you that the ridiculousness of the All-Star game deciding home field advantage, I'm with you. But you can't blame Bud for the tie.
Well, I disagree about that, and I think that the tie really illustrates why it was a ridiculous decision by Bud to have the All-Star game decide something as important as home field advantage.
Again, we agree on that part of it, but I will not blame Bud for something he could not control. Now, I do blame is the manager of, I think it was the 95 American League team that didn't let Ricky Bonas pitch when he was in the bullpen. We don't have to go there right now. Any final thoughts about about Bud?
Only that Rob Manfred has done such a bad job, I'm actually feeling a little nostalgic for Bud, but maybe that's a topic for another time.
I believe it is. We'll be right back to wrap things up at SwamiLee's Sports Talk. At SwamiLee's Sports Talk, I'm Swami Lee.
I am Mike, the Swami Stumper.
Well, he wishes. What we're doing now is we each have 60 seconds to talk about something about sports collectibles. Mike's going to go first, so I'm going to defer. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Lee. Well, here at SwamiLee's, even though today we talked all about baseball, we're not just all about baseball. And in fact, we're not just all about professional sports. I have here with me a collectible Rutgers University football helmet. Rutgers is the finest institution of higher education in the United States, the birthplace of college football. This is the helmet that my Scarlet Knights wear most weeks. A fine white on red. I do have a couple of other helmets. Here we have the Midnight red on black helmet that Rutgers wore to beat the ranked Michigan State team in 2014. The only time in my memory that the fans have ever rushed the field at High Point Stadium. And lastly, we have the bicentennial helmet with the American flag. Nobody's going to kneel here before this helmet, but it's a nice look if you're interested.
As Mike said, we do have a nice selection of NFL mini helmets. Now, this is the Eagles, not my cup of tea personally. This is the Steelers, of course. If we don't carry the team in stock, we will get it for you, no problem. But let me tell you my favorite. My favorite are not the NFL helmets, the USFL helmets. I don't know if those of you that remember the USFL, these were the champion Baltimore Stars from 1985. And right now I have with me the Houston Gamblers. For those that remember Jim Kelly, the quarterback that lost 4 consecutive Super Bowls, he first came up with the Houston Gamblers. There were quite a few teams in the USFL. It didn't go very well. Personally, back in 1984, I was a Jacksonville Bulls fan. Why was I a Jacksonville Bulls fan? Because I was 14 years old, so what did I know, or 16 years old. So if you're interested in a nice mini helmet from the USFL so you can enjoy the good old days, you can find them at SwamiLee's. And again, if we don't have it in stock, we can get it for you. Sports Cards and Collectibles is located at 2673 Haddonfield Road in Pennsauken, New Jersey. We're located right between the Cherry Hill Mall and Route 130. SwamiLee's has a large selection of sports cards, collectibles, die-cast, figures, single cards, vintage cards, new cards, boxes of cards, and so much more. Come stop in and see the Swami. We're open 6 days a week, and our website is www.swamileecards.com. SwamiLee's Sports Cards and Collectibles for our last segment, which is a review of everything we've been talking about so far today. Thank you for tuning in to our very first show. Our next show will be next week, where we will have a totally different topic. And I, again, will have no knowledge of the topics in advance. So it will be a football conversation because we'll be in the heart of football season. We may review the fact that the Astros won the World Series in 7, really briefly, but it will be mainly geared towards football. So today we discussed
the World Series, and I'm happy to report that the Dodgers are up 1-0 and well on their way to fulfilling my call of Dodgers in 6.
Sure. If that's what makes him feel good about himself, let him think that. We'll know what really happens next week. We also discussed the worst trade in baseball history, not just the era of 69 to 1993. And that was a really bad trade. Look it up. Bill Giles should be ashamed of himself, but that's all I have to say about that topic. And lastly,
we discussed the man who ran baseball, some would say ran it into the ground, in the 1990s and 2000s, one Bud car salesman Selig.
Let's watch the car salesman jokes here, but we're not going to go there right now. So anyway, SwamiLee's Sports Cards and Collectibles thanks you for tuning in to the very first SwamiLee's Sports Talk. Remember, we're located on 2673 Haddonfield Road in Pennsauken, New Jersey. Our Facebook page, SwamiLee's Sports Card and Outlet of Pennsauken, New Jersey, has some great information about SwamiLee's and some great conversation. If you want to get in touch with us, you can just drop us a line right through there. You can also check us out at SwamiLee's Sports on Twitter. We kind of do Instagram every now and then, but not as much as we really should do that. We do have a phone, by the way, but this is 2017, so if you're over the age of, under the age of 30 or 35, you probably don't even use a phone. So we will see you next week. Mike, anything to go before we leave?
It's been a pleasure. And folks, if you're ever in the mood for some good sports talk, whether it's modern day sports talk or going back to the 70s or the 80s, drop in and see the Swami and he'll be glad to engage you.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.